Hello there, I hope everyone watching is safe and well. My name is Alex and I'm an actor, and because the theatres are closed at the moment, I've been doing a lot of storytelling, mostly for my nephews, but I hope that you've seen the two stories I've already shared with you, one of my favourites from Alice in Wonderland and another of my favourites by Edward Lear. I'd like to tell you a third story, and this one's slightly different because I wrote this story. When my godson was very small, he loved dinosaurs. So I wrote 20 different stories about a whole town full of dinosaurs. And this is the first one. I hope you enjoy it. Under the volcano, and not too far, from the sulphur springs and the pits of tar, in the middle of a forest of tall palm trees, you'll find some houses that look like these. This is where I live. You can tell from the roars. My neighbours are all dinosaurs. I'm Alex the Alxosaurus. Hello. Now, once upon 70 million years ago... Wait. Which of the stories shall I tell about the dinosaurs living in Dinosaur Dell? The story of Jake the Egg. In a nest of sand, by the shore of the lake, there was an egg whose name was Jake. Knock, knock, knock. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Jake the egg began to hatch. Gosh, said Jake, who had been an egg but definitely wasn't any more. He said it mostly to himself, as there was no one else around. I'm definitely not an egg. I wonder what I am. A huge dragonfly whizzed over the surface of the lake, making ripples. Maybe if I could see myself, said Jake to himself again, as the dragonfly had disappeared into the wood beyond the lake on her shimmering wings. He scrambled down to the edge of the lake and peered into the water. It was like a mirror. A face peered back. The face was on top of a long blue neck. That's funny, said Jake. My neck doesn't feel that long. Suddenly, the face popped out of the water entirely. Hello, said Jake. Who are you? I'm Cousteau, said the creature happily, and I'm a plesiosaurus. And who are you? I'm Jake, said Jake. And perhaps I'm a plesiosaurus too. I don't think so, said Cousteau doubtfully. You're far too tiny. Besides, a plesiosaurus has this long neck and flippers, which makes her streamlined. Oh, said Jake, who wasn't really sure what that meant. Your neck is far too short, and those little feet wouldn't be much good for swimming. No, you're far too tiny to be a plesiosaurus, I'm afraid. Perhaps I could try, said Jake, but the plesiosaurus had vanished into the lake with a splash. Jake stuck his head under the water. Cousteau, he called, though her name came out as bubbles. The plesiosaurus was nowhere to be seen through the colourful shoals of fish that surrounded him. Suddenly, a huge fish with teeth like razors appeared out of the gloomy depths of the lake with a wicked glint in his eye. Just in time, Jake pulled his head out of the water. The jaws of the fish snapped shut on nothing. Cheated of a tasty snack, it lashed its tail crossly. Jake scrambled up the sandy shore, shaking the water off of himself. Phew, he said. Perhaps it's better not to be a plesiosaurus. If my neck were any longer, that fish would have caught me. And he wandered along, pondering. I wonder what I am. The thought was so preoccupying, he had to sit down on a mangrove root to think about it. Suddenly, some of the roots nearby began to move around most alarmingly. They weren't roots at all, but bumps on someone's tail. Hello, said Jake. Who are you? I'm Stig, said the creature, giggling. And I'm a Stegosaurus. And who are you? I'm Jake, said Jake. And perhaps I'm a Stegosaurus too. I don't think so, said Stig, doubtfully. You're far too tiny, and anyway, a Stegosaurus has these bony plates and these spikes on his tail. It's called a thagomizer. Oh, said Jake, who had never heard the word before, which was hardly surprising, as Stig had just made it up. Your tiny little tail wouldn't be much good for keeping you out of danger. No, you're far too tiny to be a Stegosaurus. Perhaps I could try, said Jake. but the Stegosaurus had squelched away into the mangroves, swishing his thagomizer from side to side. "Well," said Jake, "I guess he went that way. Stig!" he called. But the only answer he got was from a mangrove crab who clacked his claws at him. Jake walked further and further into the swamp, and the further he went, the deeper he sank into the swamp. "Oops," said Jake, who was now up to his middle in a puddle of mud. He started to wiggle and squirm, but that only made him sink deeper. Suddenly, his little tail, which was still poking out of the mud, touched a mangrove root. Without thinking, he curled it around the root and used it to hook himself out of the swamp. He scrambled up a mossy bank, wiping off the smelly mud. "Phew," he said. "Perhaps it's better not to be a Stegosaurus. I'd never have gotten out of that swamp with spikes on my tail." And he wandered along, pondering. "I wonder who I am." He got so tired out thinking about it that he stopped for a rest in the middle of a forest of towering sequoia trees. He leaned against a mighty trunk to catch his breath, when suddenly the trunk started to move. It wasn't a tree trunk at all. It was someone's leg. Far above him, a head on a long neck peered down at him. "Hello," said Jake. "Who are you?" "I'm Bob," said the creature, smilingly, "and I'm a Brachiosaurus. And who are you?" "I'm Jake," said Jake, "and perhaps I'm a Brachiosaurus too." "I shouldn't think so," said Bob, doubtfully. "You're far too tiny. A Brachiosaurus is quite the tallest dinosaur around, 59 feet, and you're hardly even 1 foot. "Oh," said Jake, who felt very small indeed now. "You're far too tiny to be a Brachiosaurus, little one," said Bob with a smile. "Perhaps I could try," said Jake. But the Brachiosaurus had lumbered off into the forest, shaking leaves from the trees as he passed. "Bob?" called Jake after him, but the Brachiosaurus's head was so far up in the treetops he would never have heard. Jake picked his way through the fern fronds on the forest floor. Suddenly, he heard a rustling. Perhaps Bob was coming back. But it wasn't Bob. It was a pack of marauding crocodiliforms. There were 5 of them. Snapping at the lacewing flies they stirred up from the undergrowth. "Gosh!" said Jake, and without another sound clambered up into a tall sequoia tree, right up to the topmost branch. Far beneath him, the hungry crocodiliforms sniffed the air and moved on through the forest, still hungry. "Phew," said Jake, clambering down. "Perhaps it's better not to be a Brachiosaurus. I'd never have managed to climb that tree and escape." And he wandered along, pondering. "I wonder what I am." Because he wasn't looking where he was going, he tripped straight over a rock, right in the middle of the path. The rock was not very happy, and harumphed loudly from its other end. It wasn't a rock at all. "Hello," said Jake. "Who are you?"
"I am the Brigadier," said the creature pompously, "and I am a Euopolocephalus. And who, might I ask, are you, young dinosaur?"
"I'm Jake," said Jake. Perhaps I'm a Euopolocephalus."
"Nonsense," said the Brigadier bluntly. "You're far too tiny. In any case, a Euopolocephalus has a club on his tail and is fully armoured, even his eyelids."
"Oh," said Jake, blinking his own eyelids, which were definitely not armoured with bone.
"You're far too tiny to be a Euopolocephalus."
"Perhaps I should try," said Jake. But the Euopolocephalus had gone wheezing away over the rocks. Jake didn't think that calling after the Brigadier was a very good idea, so on he went, through the rocky canyons. Thin red towers of rocks called hoodoos rose up on all sides of him. He could just about squeeze through them and was quite relieved to get to the other side at last. As he looked back, he could see that huge boulders balanced precariously on top of the towers of rock. "Phew," said Jake, looking at his skinny tail. "Perhaps it's better not to be a Euopolocephalus. With all that armour, I could never have squeezed through there. I'd have ended up with a rock on my head." And he wandered along, pondering. "I wonder what I am." He followed a tinkling brook that fell down the cliffs beyond in sparkling ribbons. when he got to the cliffs, there was no way but up. So he began to climb. Halfway up, he reached up his little hand and grabbed a large stalactite that was hanging out of a cave. "Ooh," said the stalactite, and Jake only just managed to stop himself falling down the cliff in surprise. He looked up and saw a pair of beady eyes at the end of a long, sharp beak that he had just grabbed. "Hello," said Jake. "Who are you?"
"I am the professor,"
said the creature sagely.
"and I am a Pteranodon. And who are you?"
"I'm Jake," said Jake. "And perhaps I'm a Pteranodon too."
"Oh, not likely," said the professor. "You're far too tiny. In any case, a Pteranodon has wings 12 feet wide."
"Oh," said Jake, looking at his little arms, which definitely weren't wings. "Perhaps I could try."
"Oh, I don't think so,"
said Professor Pteranodon, and stretched out her wings proudly. At that moment, a huge gust of wind swept the face of the rocks, and with a surprised screech, Professor Pteranodon, caught unawares, was bowled over the cliff, flapping her leathery wings, and crash-landed in a heap in some ginkgo trees far below. "Phew," said Jake, looking at his fingers holding tight to the rocks. "Perhaps it's better not to be a Pteranodon. Fingers might be better than wings sometimes." And he pulled himself up to the top of the cliffs. And he wandered along, pondering, "I wonder what Oh!" And he forgot to wonder, because on a bank of moss were some beautiful larch cones, green and pink. He bent down to pick one up, and there was a shrill squeal as from behind the bank appeared a face with 3 horns and a large grey frill decorated with the pink and green larch cones. "Hello," said Jake. "Who are you?"
"I am Tracy," said the creature indignantly. "And I am a Triceratops. And who are you?"
"I'm Jake," said Jake. "And perhaps I'm a Triceratops too."
"Definitely not," said Tracy. "You're far too tiny. In any case, a Triceratops has a horn on her snout and a pair above her eyes, as well as this pretty frill."
"Oh," said Jake.
"You're far too tiny to be a Triceratops. Now, out of my way, there's a good boy. I was just having a lie down, but I've got so many errands to run this afternoon. Claw Marks and Spencer's is closing soon."
And before Jake could say anything, Tracy the Triceratops had bustled away. On went Jake, feeling really rather downcast now. He still wasn't sure what he was, though he definitely wasn't an egg, or a plesiosaurus, or a stegosaurus, or a brachiosaurus, or a euopolocephalus, or a pteranodon, and he bumped into someone face first. "Perhaps it's better not to be a Triceratops too. If I had a horn on my nose, I would have hurt you." A huge face with a mouth full of sharp teeth grinned down at him. "Hello," said Jake. "Who are you?"
"I'm Tyrone," said the creature, still grinning. "And I am a Tyrannosaurus. And who are you?"
"Well, I'm Jake," said Jake. "And perhaps I'm a Tyrannosaurus too."
"I doubt that," said Tyrone. "You're far too tiny. In any case, you can only squeak, but a Tyrannosaurus can roar!"
And Jake ran off as fast as his legs would carry him.
"Oh, drat," said Tyrone to himself. "Perhaps it's better not to be a Tyrannosaurus sometimes. I always forget how loud and scary I am."
Jake couldn't run any more. He plonked himself down on a rock, which was definitely a rock this time, and not the tail of a grumpy euopolocephalus, and he sighed to himself loudly. "Well, I don't know what I am. I'm not like any of them. I'm neither one thing nor the other. And if I'm not something or another thing, then I must be a nothing. Oh, I don't want to be a nothing." And poor Jake sniffed, and a tear rolled down his cheek.
"Cheer up, Jake,"
said a voice. It was Cousteau, the plesiosaurus.
"You might be tiny, but you dodged that fearsome fish."
"And rescued yourself from that smelly swamp," added Stig, the stegosaurus, lumbering up to join them. "And escaped those carnivorous crocodiliforms," put in Bob, the brachiosaurus, appearing. Avoided the precarious builders. Good work that, my lad,
said Brigadier Euopolocephalus.
"Oh, climb the cliff!"
cried Professor Pteranodon as she alighted, still a trifle rumpled from her crash landing.
"And even took on a Tyrannosaurus,"
smiled Tracy the Triceratops as she appeared claw in claw with Tyrone the Tyrannosaurus.
"And no one couldn't do that,"
cried Stig.
"Grandma!"
winced Professor Pteranodon.
"Ooh, where?"
he said.
"I hope she's bought sweets."
Professor Pteranodon shook her head in despair.
"But I still don't know what I am,"
said Jake. And that's where I came in, Alex the Alxosaurus. Perhaps I can help, as it's my job to tell the stories of everyone in Dinosaur Dell. I know who you are, and they joined me in chorus. You're a dinosaur called a Joholosaurus. And though you are tiny, you're not at all weak. Your adventurous spirit is truly unique. So don't look downhearted, and please don't be sad, because you are special. It's Jake's mum and dad, our little adventurer, so brave and bold, Jake Joholosaurus. And that's Jake's tale told. I hope you enjoyed that story. There are lots more of them about all the other different dinosaurs who live in Dinosaur Dell, and maybe one day I'll get a chance to read them to you, or maybe one day you'll have the book of them yourselves. Take care and stay safe and well, and I'll see you soon. Bye now.